Chapter 15. The Song is Over. It was June before I returned to town. I cooked up some reason to take 3 days off and took the bullet train early one Tuesday. A white short sleeved sports shirt, green cotton pants worn through at the knees, white tennis shoes, no luggage. I'd even forgotten to shave after getting up that morning. It was the first time I'd put on tennis shoes in ages, and heels were worn through crooked. I'd been walking off center without knowing it. Boarding a long distance train without any luggage gave me a feeling of exhilaration. It was as if while out taking a leisurely stroll, I was suddenly like a dive bomber caught in a space time warp, in which there is nothing, no dentist appointments, no pending issues in desk drawers, no inextricably complicated human involvements, no favors demanded. I left that behind temporarily. All I had with me were my tennis shoes with their misshapen rubber soles. They held fast to my feet like vague memories of another space-time. But that had hardly mattered. Nothing that some canned beer and dried out ham sandwiches couldn't put out of mind. It had been 4 years. 4 years ago, the return home had been to take care of paperwork related to the family registry when I got married. When I thought back on it, what a pointless trip. I thought it was all paperwork. The problem was that nobody else thought it. It comes down to the different ways in which minds work. What's over for one person isn't over for another, but the path splits in two different directions, and so you end up apart. From the point on there was no hometown for me, nowhere to return to. What a relief! No one wants me, no one to want anything from me. I had a second can of beer and caught 30 minutes of shut eye. When I woke up, the initial carefree sense of release was gone. The train moved on, and as it did, the sky turned a rain grey, beneath which stretched the same boring scenery. No matter how much speed we put on, there was no escaping boredom. On the contrary, the faster the speed, the more headway into boredom. Ah, the nature of boredom. Next to me sat a business type in his mid-twenties, engrossed in a newspaper, hardly moving the whole time. Navy blue summer suit, not a wrinkle, starched white shirt, just black from the cleaners, shiny black shoes. I looked up at the ceiling of the car and puffed on a cigarette. I made a mental list of all the songs that Beatles ever recorded, 73 titles, before I ran out. I wondered how many numbers Paul McCartney himself could remember. I stared out the window a while, then shifted my eyes back to the ceiling. I was 29 years old. In 6 months, my 20s would be over. A whole decade since living here. One big blank. Not one thing of value had I gotten out of it. Not one meaningful thing had I done. Boredom was all there was. How were things before? Surely there had to been something positive. Had there been anything that really moved me? Anything that really moved anyone? Maybe it was all gone now. Lost, perhaps meant to be lost. Nothing I can do about it. Got to let it go. At least I was still around. If the only good Indian is a dead Indian, it was my fate to go on living. What for? To tell tales to a stone wall? Really now. Why stay in a hotel? Jay asked when I wrote my hotel number on the back of a matchbox and handed it to him. You've got a home, haven't you? Why not stay there? It's not my home anymore, I said. Jay didn't say anything to that. With 3 plates of steaks lined up in front of me, I drank half my beer, then puffed out the rat's letters and handed them to Jay. He wiped his hands on a towel and read the 2 letters through quickly before going over them again, carefully, word by word. Alive and kicking, is he? He's alive, all right, I said, taking another sip of beer. But before I do anything else, I've got to shave. You have a razor and some shaving cream you could lend me? I do, said Jay, bringing out a travel kit from behind the counter. You can use the washroom, but there's no hot water. Cold water's fine, I said, as long as there's no drunk woman sprawled out on the floor. Makes it hard to shave. Jay's bar had completely changed. The old Jay's bar had been a dank place in the basement of an old building by the highway. On summer nights with the air conditioner going, a fine mist would form. After a long bout of drinking, even your shirt would be damp. Jay's real name was some unpronounceable Chinese polysyllable. The nickname Jay was given to him by some GIs on the base where he worked after the war. His real name was soon forgotten. In 1954, Jay quit his job on the base and opened a small bar, the very first Jay's bar. The bar proved quite successful. A large part of the clientele was from the Air Force officer candidate school, and the atmosphere wasn't bad. After the bar got its start, Jay got married, but 5 years later his wife died. Jay never talked about the cause of her death. In 1963, as Vietnam War was beginning to go great guns, Jay sold the bar and moved away far through my hometown. There he opened the second Jay's bar. He had a cat, smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, never touched a drop of alcohol. That's the sum of everything I know about Jay. Up until the time I met the rat, I always went to Jay's bar alone. I'd sip a beer slowly, smoke cigarettes, feed coins into the jukebox. This was when Jay's bar was usually empty. So I'd sit at the counter talking about all kinds of things with Jay, though about what exactly I don't remember. What could a shy 17-year-old high school student and a Chinese widower have to talk about? When I turned 18 and left town, the rat came along and took my place at the bar drinking beer. 5 years ago, when the rat left town, there was no one to take his place. 6 months later, when the road was widened, Jay had to change shops again, and the second Jay's bar was relegated to legend. The third Jay's bar was a quarter of a mile away by the river. It wasn't much bigger than the old place, but it was on the third floor of a new four-story building with an elevator. Taking an elevator to the Jay's bar made me feel like I had the address wrong. The same with looking out over the lights of town from the counter. This new place had big windows facing west and south, out onto the line of hills and the area where the ocean used to be. The ocean front had been filled in a few years back, and the whole mile there was packed with gravestone rows of tall buildings. Used to be water over there, I said. Right, said Zay. Went swimming there a lot. Yeah, said Zay, bringing a generic lighter up to the cigarette at his lips. They bulldoze the hills to put off the houses, all the dirt to the sea for the landfill, then go and build there too. And they think it's all fine and proper. I drank my beer. The ceiling speakers were playing the latest Bose Skaggs hit. There wasn't a jukebox in sight. Almost all the customers in the place were university student couples, neatly dressed and politely sipping their highballs. No girls on the verge of passing out drunk, no hot fights brewing. You could tell that when they went home, they put on pajamas, brushed their teeth, and went straight to bed. There was nothing wrong with that. Nice and neat is fine and dandy. There's nothing in a bar or in a world at large that says things have to be a certain way. Jay kept his eyes on me the whole while. So everything's different and you feel out of place? Not really, I said. It's just that the chaos has changed shape. The giraffe and the bear have traded hats, and the bear switched calves with the zebra. Same as ever, Jay laughed. Times have changed, I said. A lot of things have changed, but the bottom line is that's fine. Everything tears praises. No complaints. Jay didn't say anything. I had myself another beer. Jay had another cigarette. How's your life going? I asked Jay. Not bad. How's the wife? Don't really know. You know how things are between two people. There are times when I think everything's working out fine, and times when I don't. Maybe that's what marriage is all about. Well, maybe, said Jay, scratching the tip of his nose with his little finger. I forget what married life is like. It's been so long. How's the cat? Died 4 years ago, right after you got married. Something intestinal. But really, it had a good long life. Lived 12 years. That's longer than my wife was with me. 12 years isn't a bad little life, is it? I guess not. There's this animal cemetery up on the hill, so I buried it there, overlooking the tall buildings. Anywhere around here, those buildings are all you can see. Not that it makes much difference to a cat. Sad? Sure, even if a person had died, I wouldn't have been so as sad. Does that sound funny? I shook my head. Jay said to making some fancy cocktail and a Caesar salad for a customer. Meanwhile, I played with a Scandinavian puzzle on the counter. You were supposed to put together this picture of three butterfly meteor over a field of clover, all inside a glass case. I gave up after 10 minutes and put the thing aside. No kids? Jay came back over to ask. You're getting on the right age to have kids, you know. Don't want kids. Oh? I mean, I would be at a loss if I had a kid like me. Jay chuckled and poured more beer into my glass. You're always thinking too far ahead. No, that's not it. What I mean is, I don't really know if it's the right thing to do, making new life. Kids grow up, generations take their place. What does it all come to? More hills bulldozed, more ocean front filled in, faster cars, and more cats run over. Who needs it? That's the only dark side of things. Good things happen too. Good people can make things worthwhile. Yeah, name three, I said. Jay gave it a thought and laughed. That's for your children's generation to decide, not you. Your generation is already over and done with? In a sense, said Jay. The song is over, but the melody lingers on. You always had a way of putting things. Just showing off, I said. At 9 o'clock, Jay's bar was starting to get crowded, so I said good night to Jay and left. My face still tingled in the spots where I'd shaved, having only cold and water. Maybe because I'd splashed on vodka lime instead of aftershave. The J claimed it was just as effective, but now my whole face smelled like vodka. The night was unexpectedly warm, though the sky was its usual heavy overcast. A moist breeze was blowing in a slow and easy from the south, same as it used to. A sea scent mingled with a hint of rain, insects calling from the clumps of grass along the river, everything brimming with a languid nostalgia. It seemed that it would rain any minute. When it did, it came in so fine a drizzle that you couldn't tell if it was raining or not. But I got completely drenched anyway. I could just make out the river flowing in the white light of the Mercury Paper street lamp. The water was as clear as ever. It came straight out of the hills with nothing to pollute it along the way. The river had silted up with the small rocks and gravel washed down from the hills, creating little falls here and there. Beneath each fall, a deep pool had formed where small fish gathered. During dry spells, the whole river used to dry up into a sandy bed, leaving only a faintly damp white trail. Years ago, on my walks, I traced that trail upstream, searching for where the river had gone. The road by the river had been one of my favorites. I could walk at the same speed as the river. I could feel it breathing. It was alive. More than anything, it was the river who had to thank for creating the town. For grinding down the hills over how many hundreds or thousands of years, for hauling the dirt, filling the sea, making the trees grow, the town belonged to the river from the very beginning, and it would always be that way. Because this was the rainy season, the river flowed uninterrupted to the sea. The trees planted along the banks were fragrant with new leaves. There was a greenness in the air. Couples strolled arm in arm. Old folks walked their dogs. High school kids hung around their motorbikes smoking cigarettes. Your typical summer evening. I stopped into a liquor store, bought 2 cans of beer, and carried them in a paper bag down to the sea. Where the river met the sea, it turned into an inlet, or rather into a half-filled-in canal. Here was the only untouched stretch of the ocean front left, 50 yards of it. There was even something of an old beach. Small waves rolled in, leaving smooth pieces of driftwood. On the concrete jelly, bits of old nails and spray-paint graffiti remained. 50 yards of honest-to-goodness shoreline, if you overlooked the fact that it was hemmed in by 30-foot-high concrete walls. And that was the walls kept going straight out for several miles, channeling the sea narrowly in between, and that tall buildings lined either side, 50 yards of sea. The rest was history. I left the river and walked east along what had been coastline road. Bewilderingly enough, the old jetty was still there. Now a jetty without an ocean is an odd creature indeed. I stopped at the exact spot where I used to park to look at the sea, went over to sit down on the jetty and drank a beer. What a view! Instead of ocean, a vast expanse of reclaimed land and housing developments met my eyes. Faceless blocks of apartments, the miserable foundations of an attempt to build a neighborhood. Asphalt roads threaded through the building complexes, here a parking lot, there a bus terminal, a gasoline station and a large park and a wonderful community center, everything brand new, everything unnatural. On one side, the piles of soil hauled down from the hills for the landfill loomed harsh and grey, next to the areas where not a part of the grand scheme had been overtaken by quick rooting weeds. But what was there to say? Already it was a whole new game played by new rules. No one could stop it now. I polished off my 2 beers and hurled the empty can across the reclaimed land toward where the sea used to be. I watched them disappear into the sea of wind-blown weeds. Then I smoked a cigarette. I was taking my last drag when I saw a man, flashlight in hand, heading my way. 40s, grey shirt, grey trouser, and a grey cap, probably a security guard for the area. "You just threw something, didn't you?" said the man. "Yeah, I threw something." "What did you throw?" Round metallic lidded objects. The security guard put on a sour face. Why do you throw them? No particular reason. Been throwing things from 12 years back. At times I've thrown half a dozen things at once. Nobody said a word. That was back then, said the security guard. This is a city property now, and it's against the law to discard rubbish on city property. I swallowed. For a moment something inside me trembled, then stopped. The real problem here, I said, is that what you say makes sense. It's the law, he said. I sighed and took a pack of cigarettes out of my pocket. So what should I do? Well, I can ask you to go pick them up. It's too dark and it's about to rain. So do me a favor and don't throw things again. I won't, I said. Good night. Good night, said the security guard as he walked away. I stretched out on the jetty and looked up at the sky. As the man said, it was starting to rain. I smoked another cigarette and thought over the encounter with the guard. 10 years ago, I would have come on tougher. Well, maybe not. What difference would it make anyway? I went back to the Riverside Road, and by the time I had managed to catch a taxi, the rain was coming down in a drizzle. To the hotel, I said. Here on a trip? Asked the driver. Uh-huh. First time on these parts? Second time, I said.